I'll say a quick hello. Well, Rupert's just sort of finalising so we're going to video it. Did everyone know that we were filming it, and is everyone happy with that? No one's got any problems? Good. So before I hand over to Claire, just so that everyone knows who else is in the room, we've got the Frome Food Hub, we've got Share, Denude, Frome Families for the Future, we've got Iluna, the Seed Library, and Everyone Needs Pockets. So everyone's kind of all to do with planet-friendly living. So do hang around, have a cup of tea and coffee, water, and have a chat to people after Claire has done her wonderful talk on Nurdles.
Thank you.
I'll hand over to Claire.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Claire, otherwise known as Nurdle Nerd, or the Nurdle Lady, or the Plastic Lady, or all sorts of names like this. And this is Nurdle. Nurdle's doing a very brief guest appearance as a massive favour, and is then going to exit the room very carefully like a crab. So yeah, I'm here to talk about Nurdles and all things plastic and microplastic, and I've got lots of photos which I'm not going to do death by PowerPoint, but I'm just going to go through with you. So Nurdle's going to wave goodbye. I'm going to escort you out. I'm going to be in massive debt for that. That's my daughter. Okay, so I'm going to do sort of a quick tour into how I got into Nurdles and what Nurdles are. So these are Nurdles. This is a better one. Nurdles are teeny tiny little plastic pellets that make all plastic products. And I've been talking about Nurdles for 3 years, and I put about Nurdles on TikTok last week, and one of my followers went, "Oh, I didn't know Nurdles made plastic things. I thought they were a separate thing to plastic things." So it's just sort of sharing the story. So to make a spoon, you need 25 Nurdles to be melted down to make a spoon. So they're the starting point, like the Lego building blocks of all plastic products. How did I get into Nurdles? You don't have to read all this. I'm a teacher, and I started cleaning beaches for mental health, just sort of like picking up things on beaches, walking along. And I got a call in 2019 from a Service Against Sewage rep saying, "Please come, my beach is in dire need of help. I live in Southampton, and I really need any beach cleaners that can come and help." So I Googled the beach, and it's called Chesil Bay. It's not the big one with the stones. I sort of drove to the wrong place, first of all. It's Chesil Bay, not Chesil Beach. And this is what it's got on the website, and it talks about it being an area of outstanding beauty. It's salt marshes, and it's got all these very important birds that go there. It's the only place that certain birds go to. And I was quite excited about going there. When I got there, I cried, and I literally mean I went down on my knees and cried. This is what I saw. The entire beach, every single white bit you see is a Nurdle, and this beach from end to end. And literally, I'm nearly in tears now. Literally, what's happened? How is this allowed to happen? And what happens is downstream, this is a beach that is downstream, it's off the River Itchen, it's downstream from 3 plastic manufacturers. And Nurdles are not classed as a hazardous material. If they fall on the floor in the factory, they're contaminated and have to be swept away. Quite often they're hosed down the drain. When there's a stormwater surge, they're just let out into the rivers. So the River Itchen has got 3. So this beach we dug down, and that's me sort of digging down. It goes down probably about that far. So it's been happening for a very, very long time. So we did what's called a quadrat study. So you take this 100 square, put it in lots of different places on the beach, and you count how many Nurdles you can find in the 100 squares. Every single place we tested, 100% Nurdle coverage. So that beach is 100% contaminated with plastics across the whole beach. Because it's a salt marsh, the only way to get those Nurdles out is basically to get a bulldozer and bulldoze the whole beach up and start again, but it's the nesting habitat of so many creatures. So they don't know what to do about it. So at the moment, it still looks like that, because without disturbing the animals that are already living there, they can't get these plastics off the beach. So I couldn't understand how this could happen. So I wrote to the plastic manufacturers. Funnily enough, didn't hear back. Wrote to the local council, got my class to write to the local council because I'm a teacher. And I was told it was a legal loophole. Legal loophole because of the storm drains, legal loopholes because Nurdles aren't classed as a hazardous material. So I started doing some research. As a teacher, I sort of spend my life teaching children about things. I thought, I've got to share this. So FEDRA is a charity in Scotland that are trying really hard to get Nurdles classified as a hazardous material. And so they've got these brilliant infographics on their website that sort of shows Nurdles, how they're made and how they're lost. So Nurdles start off as oil, and actually with oil going down in popularity, with plastics going up in popularity, oil companies are still making an absolute killing, because Nurdles start life as oil, go to a factory to be made into Nurdles. In transit, Nurdles are transported to be light in these bags, which you can imagine, get a forklift truck, get a hole through one of these, like this one is that I found on a beach, and they just spill all down the motorway. So Nurdles are lost in transport, and I've seen videos of Nurdles just pouring out down the motorways. Not hazardous material, doesn't have to be, the companies do not have to clear it up. They do if social media gets on them. There's been a few cases where social media has got on them and they've had to clear it up, but legally they don't need to. Gets to the factory, like I said, if they fall on the ground, then swept up, sometimes sent to be made back into Nurdles, sometimes straight to landfills, sometimes into the rivers. If we send our plastic for recycling, gets turned back into Nurdles, so the cycle continues. So even if we're recycling our products, it gets turned back into Nurdles and then can be lost again. So it's this cyclical thing that just keeps going. Nurdles are also transported at sea, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. So why are Nurdles so bad? Well, first of all, they're little tiny bits of plastic, but Nurdles, as you can see, look remarkably like fish eggs if you sort of have them floating at sea. So animals who live on fish eggs just consume them, they just don't realise. And also if you've got the big animals that just sort of eat the filter feeders, they're just filtering in absolutely scary amounts because Nurdles just float on the top, and the clear Nurdles are completely invisible. If you put them in water, you just can't see them there. So these are infographics from Plastic Oceans. They've done lots and lots of studies. Currently, 100% of sea turtles are known to ingest plastics. 99% of seabirds by 2050. Really scary statistics, but when I started looking into it, I thought, well, what does it do? It actually causes what's called hyperbuoyancy. So if sea creatures ingest Nurdles, it's like having a giant armband inside their stomach. So this giant armband sits inside their stomach. They can't dive. So you've got puffins and sea creatures that are found literally just floating on the surface. They can't dive for food and they're dying of starvation because they can't. Their digestion means they can't pass through them, and turtles can't. It's not very nice. So this is staggering. I only learnt this year. I was on a conference with people all around the world. There's very few of us, so you just mention the word Nurdles on your social media and you get asked to do a conference. And I was speaking to someone from South Africa who's been dealing with Nurdles, and she told me this is something that I didn't realise at all. If a turtle nests around plastic, and it doesn't have to be Nurdles, it can be any plastic, plastic absorbs heat. So during the day, the plastic absorbs heat. That increases the temperature of the sand around it. If the sand temperature is increased, the sex of the turtle hatchlings isn't determined until they're incubating. So if you increase the temperature of the sand, you change the gender of the turtle hatchlings. So in some areas, 99% of turtle hatchlings are now being born female, because if it's hotter, it's female, if it's cooler, it's males. So normally the eggs are stacked at different levels and you sort of get quite a good balance. In areas, as you can imagine, like this, if all the sea turtles are becoming female, we're going to get no sea turtles because they can't mate anymore. So that blew me away, absolutely blew me away. I was just staggered from that. So Nurdle book number 4 is currently being written about this, because it just... this is something I just sort of very quickly putting up there. These are all the microplastics that are currently in the ocean. So microplastics are anything that's less than 5 millimetres. Nurdles are a primary microplastic. We make them less than 5 millimetres to start with. They're man-made, less than 5 millimetres, they're going in the ocean. And pellet spills on Nurdles are the second biggest microplastic in the ocean, even behind big bits of plastic that have broken down into little bits. Nurdles are overtaking those as the second highest microplastic. The biggest is shredded down dust from car tyres. That's the biggest plastic in the ocean. But pellet spills, 230 million tonnes per year are going into the ocean just from spillages, which, again, blows my mind. So the link between Nurdles and single-use plastic, this is the one I'm sort of trying to share. So I've got a very tiny video which I've been helped to make that I'm going to share with you. So that was the one I put on social media, and somebody said I hadn't made the connection at all. It just hadn't clicked. So that kind of links with this one. People are becoming more familiar with this. They're becoming more familiar with the fact that some of these things are going to be floating around the ocean for a very, very long time. But actually, in making this, you've probably caused 20 to 30 Nurdles to be floating around the ocean as well. So there's kind of this double loss that's hidden. I thought I'd share with you some of the ways that the plastics break down, because it fascinates me. Bottles, for some reason, they go into the sea like this. The bottom comes off first. So when you're beach cleaning, you find the bottoms. Then you end up with like these very strange sort of jellyfish-like things. And most of the bottles I collect off the sea end up like that. And then this bit comes separately. Or it splits like that. They become really brittle. Once it starts breaking down further, these bits that then break off like that, that becomes a plastic shard. So that's there's scary amounts of those floating around. And then once these start breaking down again, they become what's called secondary microplastics. So primary microplastics are man-made, secondary microplastics are ocean-made. So they're the ones that started as something else and then become a smaller bit. And if you look in across beaches, there's a really big mix of primary and secondary microplastics out there. This is a very, very quick one. We all know that plastics break down, getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and eventually end up in our food system. Because Nurdles go in as a microplastic anyway, they are breaking down into tinier and tinier bits much quicker, because they're so small to start with. So they're actually being found now in our food group, because they started tiny and they're just getting tinier. Now, I said about Nurdles escaping in transportation. Who heard about the Express Pearl disaster last year? Did any of you hear about it? No, it was on the news for one day and then it vanished. So the express pearl is a transporter. There's lots of these in the ocean, tons of these floating around. This one was transporting quite a few containers of nurdles. Now, to make nurdles on lorries are transported in these. In a container ship, what they do is they fill it with a plastic liner, get a hose and pump the nurdles in, just fill it right to the brim. Each one contains, I did a bit of looking, over 1 billion nurdles per container ship. So if one of those was to break in half, 1 billion nurdles straight away. So last year, the Express Pearl was going around the edge of Sri Lanka and it ran aground. And what happened is it ran aground and it caught fire. The Express Pearl was carrying nitric acid. And because nitric acid is classed as a hazardous material, they had to come in. Loads of people came in trying to sort it. It had to be dealt with. It then started leaking oil. Oil is classed as a hazardous material. Lots of people came in, had to deal with it. It was also carrying ridiculously high amounts of nurdles. Not classed as a hazardous material, nobody had to deal with it. So billions and billions and billions of nurdles reached the shores. Now, if you think Sri Lanka is predominantly fishing, tourism, so the whole of the west coast of Sri Lanka was basically written off for all those people. Some people have had to move villages and they said there's no point in moving back, all the fish have been killed, their whole livelihood has been wiped out. Now, these people, so all the local people, while the company was dealing with the hazardous materials out at sea, the local people were having to try and deal with the billions of nurdles that were washing up on their shores. Now, nurdles, I'll show you a picture in a minute, are adsorbent. They adsorb anything that they float in. So they've been floating in nitric acid, they've been floating in an oil, they've been floating in all sorts of nasties. These people are picking them up with their bare hands, shoving them into anything they could find. So normal absorbent materials, nurdles are adsorbent. So when we say if you pick up nurdles or microplastics from the beach, always, always, always either wear gloves or wash your hands afterwards, because they absorb some real nasties in the ocean. Eventually, people got on board and started clearing it up, but the clear-up operation it's not in the news anymore, but I'm still seeing that Sri Lanka is still covered, absolutely covered. These were computer simulations done at the time, so as you can see, it happened last year. 31st of May, because they didn't deal with the nurdles, billions and billions, billions of nurdles are sort of circulating the oceans. They'll start washing up on our shores in a couple of years because all the oceans are all joined together. They're heading off towards Australia. I think was the last thing I'd heard. There's just waves of them in the ocean. And that's not a single occurrence. There's been many. If you Google nurdle spillages, there's been a lot. So what did I do? First thing I did was went straight into my class. I was like, you're never going to believe what's been going on. So I sterilised what I was finding on the beaches, took it into my class, and we sort of sorted it out, and we did some great studies, and the children wrote to the plastic companies, Actually, one of the plastic companies agreed to do a beach clean with us. They agreed to come and do a beach clean and help out with the nurdles, and then lockdown happened, and they never went back again. So my class started investigating and looking into it, and I started saying to them, these are new problems. The people dealing with this dealt with it really badly. How would you deal with it better? What would you do? What would you tackle first? So the children started investigating. The children started coming up with these amazing inventions and saying, and we looked at concentration levels, because actually nitric acid in the ocean, once it starts getting diluted with the seawater, it actually becomes not too toxic very, very, very quickly. So the children started prioritising what they would have dealt with, how they would deal with it, coming up with these amazing inventions. We started entering engineering competitions with some of the things they were doing. They wrote to different companies and asked them, please, can you make our invention to help to clear up these nurdles? Because there's only one machine. There's two machines that can clear nurdles from a beach at the moment. One's called a trommel, which is a great big, like a giant sieve that works on a sandy beach. But as you can imagine, in a beach like that, it doesn't work at all. And then there's a man in Cornwall called Josh who's working with Karcher that's got like a giant Ghostbusters Hoover that he can, but once the Hoover's filled, so on a beach like Southampton, it doesn't work. So the children were coming up with these amazing sifting inventions and basing things on the trommel and talking to their parents about it, and it was the message was starting to go out there. Spoke to my class about this. These are year 4, so these are 7-year-olds. And one of the girls said, because we'd already done about pollution with oil spills, and one of the girls said, why didn't they get loads of those sandbags, like the hair bags like you get for oil spills? Why didn't they just put a big load of bags along there to actually try and trap the Nurdles? That would have been a genius idea. That would have been such an amazing idea. So this is why children are just give me so much hope, because they come up with the ideas that actually the big companies aren't. And this was a year 4 girl. No, this was a year 3 girl. A year 3 girl came up with this amazing invention, and I sent it off to an engineering competition, but then lockdown happened, so we never heard anything back from it. So I've been sharing it with children. I saw this on social media. Well, my daughter saw this on social media. She came up to me and said, Mum, you have got to make something to do with turtles to tell people about this, because turtles are really being affected. And this turtle had eaten, I think it was about 100 pieces of plastic. So we started making jewellery filled with little turtles, filled with microplastics. And I just used to fill them with microplastics, and we used to just call them Talk About Me Turtles and say, like, so I sold them at the Frome Independent and say, please just tell people about this, tell people about what's going on. But you can't make enough jewellery to get rid of all the plastic I was collecting, because if you collect plastic off the beach, you can't recycle it because it's mixed plastics. So I've got a garage full under my bed, in the lounge, in the dining room, in the garden. I'm literally drowning in plastic because you've got to send it to landfill. So I'm collecting it going, I can't send it to landfill. So my husband's like, you've got to do something with all this plastic. So I started making jewellery, then I started making artwork, and at the same time, I made a small version of Nurdle. I don't know where he's gone. A small version of Nurdle, and took him into my class and started telling the story with my class in a sort of nerdly voice, going, I don't want to do this. I want to help people. I want to make medicine. I don't want to be ruining the oceans and things like. And the children started writing stories through the voice of Nurdle. Nurdles aren't bad. You know, they make my asthma inhaler. They're amazing things. We're just using them really badly. We're misusing them, and we're not looking after them. So one of the children in my class went, Mrs. Vowell, you should write a book about that. So I was like, yeah, okay. So spoke to Jo Joof, who lives in Frome, amazing artist. I was doing an art workshop with her, and she said, you could illustrate that. I was like, no, I can't. I definitely can't. So I started making artwork out of the plastics, and she did amazing watercolour illustrations like this behind it, and we made a book. So we made the first book, which was this one here, Nurdle, just telling the story about Nurdles, literally saying what a Nurdle is, and please talk about it. And then each Nurdle in the book is a photograph of a real Nurdle. So I wanted the children to actually see what Nurdles were. Because if you Google Nurdle on a phone or an iPad, it comes up as hurdle or noodle. Even Google doesn't even know what a Nurdle is, even though it makes absolutely everything we own. So I just wanted people to know the word Nurdle. If we're buying it every day, we need to know what started it. So the books, that's what the books was all about. And you can't have people dying or anything in children's books. So Nurdles just make people feel a bit poorly and a bit ill. And so I went to probably about 40 publishers, and lots of them said, we love it, it's too niche. That was the feedback I got, it's too niche. And I said, but it makes everything, it's the starting point of everything. And they're like, no, it's too niche, we can't. So I decided to self-print it, and I can't afford £1,500 to make the book. So I went to Crowdfunder, and Crowdfunder were absolutely fabulous. The beach cleaning community got right behind me, crowdfunded the book, and I ended up with a mountain of books that I could then, I started sending into schools. Now made a website, and I've got tons of free resources, so I don't want teachers and parents and everybody to pay for resources. It's loads of free resources just telling people about Nurdles and what they are and what they can do. And then he got supersized because I got a bit bored on social media of just me standing on a beach with a cuddly teddy, and people would, it's not really interesting. So you've got a giant blue blob walking across the beach, suddenly you get families coming up to you going, what are you doing? Who are you? What are you? So that was how I sort of started. So he's been to Charmouth, he's been to various different places and just walked around holding a tin of Nurdles, shaking it at people. He's been to the Frome Town Centre, he's going to go to Bath soon. So Nurdle gets people talking, and he's got a little banner that he normally holds saying help the Nurdles, and people come up going, why do you want to help the Nurdles? Why are we helping them? They're bad. Why are we? And then you can start the conversation about what we can do to help, and it's just about getting people talking. So Lara suggested I put this one on. I'm here now to ask for your help, because I'm kind of just one person, just a little voice sort of screaming Nurdles, which is why I've become like the Nurdle lady. But you can help in so many ways. This is the official political bit. I've washed my hands off this. I'm not a politician. I can't do anything about this. Really, all companies need to follow Operation Clean Sleep. It's not mandatory. It's not. Even if the companies follow it, there's no tick at the end of it. If they follow Operation Clean Sweep, which tells them to look after Nurdles sustainably, there's no legal impetus to do so. Stricter stormwater permits, all these sorts of things would be amazing, but it needs a massive amount of public pressure to get there. So what's happening is there's something called the Great Nurdle Hunt, which happens every year. And what they do is they ask people to go to a beach, spend 5 minutes, 10 minutes, do a Nurdle hunt. And they've got a website, which I'll show you how to use in a minute. And if you log your results, your Nurdle finds on the website, they can use it to push government legislation. If they said there are Nurdles on every single beach in the country, which I'd like to hazard a guess there probably are, they can push legislation and say, okay, we've now got to do something about it. Statistical data and evidence is much more powerful than people, unfortunately. So this is a very quick video about how to do a Nurdle hunt. Today I've come to St Michael's Mount in Cornwall to do a Nurdle hunt. If you don't find Nurdles on the main beach, there are plenty of places you can look. First try the strand line where the tide comes up to. Then look among other ocean plastics. Try turning over seaweed. Look to see if there's a river running into the sea. Check along the banks of the river, and especially at the river mouth. Look to see if any Nurdles have been blown into vegetation at the top of the beach. Finally, you can check for Nurdles along the path or by the car park. Storm surges and high winds can sometimes leave them there. Once you've found your Nurdles, you're ready to start collecting them. If the task feels overwhelming, give yourself a small area to collect from, like a square metre. Jam jars are perfect for collecting Nurdles because you can photograph the Nurdles through the glass. And customise your own jar. You're now ready to start collecting. Once you've collected your Nurdles, don't forget to wash your hands carefully. You can now record your finds on nurdlehunt.org.uk. Go to Submit Your Findings and then use 2 fingers to find your location of your Nurdle hunt on the map. You then input the date, the number of Nurdles and the weather conditions that you found the Nurdles in. Hopefully you're now ready to save some Nurdles from the sea this autumn. So that was actually St Michael's Mount, and I had so many people saying on social media, there are no Nurdles on National Trust beaches, you will not find any. And if you go on the main beach at National Trust Beach at St Michael's Mount, there aren't any, because they sieve it every morning. There's a big bulldozer comes and sieves it. If you go up by the car park, by the river, or the little sneaky places where they don't have the big bulldozer sieving it, you'll find it. Same for Woolacombe, Croyd, all those other beaches. They're there, they're just hidden, you've got to look for them. So the only beaches you'll struggle on are really shingly beaches. So Lyme Regis, I haven't found any. Charmouth, absolutely littered with it. Show you. So last year, there were 3 great nurdle hunts at Charmouth. And that's how many nurdles and biobeads were found by, I think it was about 25 volunteers at Charmouth Beach. But if you were to look very briefly at Charmouth Beach, you wouldn't see them, you wouldn't know they were there. You just sort of, they're on normal beaches, they're just totally invisible. So all this is on the FEDRA website, and the more people do a nurdle hunt, the more information they get, the more they can push for government legislation to come through. Things you're looking for if you're doing a nurdle hunt, these are nurdles. They're little round disc-shaped things like a lentil, literally like a lentil. If they've got ridges on the side, half of those in that box have got ridges on the side, they're not nurdles, they're biobeads. Biobeads are escape, that's a whole other story. They escape from water treatment works. So biobeads are waste treatment beads that filter out the bacteria. And if you find those, there's, again, another legal loophole. They shouldn't be in the sea. They are quite contaminated. So if you find biobeads, make sure you wash your hands after them. Then you've got your secondary microplastic, your shards, BB gun pellets. I didn't think I'd find many of those. Staggering amounts of BB gun pellets in the sea floating around. I think people just play with them in fields and then they wash up into rivers and end up in the sea. Polystyrene bit balls, pontoons, cheap surfboards, cheap bodyboards, all that sort of thing, break down into those. So you take a photo, log it on the FEDRA website, and then that really helps push the legislation. And I'm speaking to the converted with all the rest of these about single-use plastics, thinking about your choices, talk to people about the word nurdle. Let's try and get it on Google so that it is actually a word and not noodle or hurdle or nurdle or something. And chat to children, because they're our next generation. They're our next generation of engineers that are going to be sorting these problems out and getting it sorted for us. So yeah, that's me, and that's what I've done so far. So if you could share nurdles, that would be amazing. Thank you.
They look quite similar to small, like if you're looking on a sandy beach.
Yeah.
They look very similar to just like a little bit of, might even be a bit of old glass or something.
Yeah.
So do they feel different? Is there a way of like knowing that it's definitely nurdle and not just like a little pebble?
They're lighter, and actually if you put your thumbnail into them, they'll slightly give with your thumbnail because they're a really soft plastic. Yeah. They're designed to have a really low melting point. So that's their aim, is you put them in a melting pot, they melt straight away, and then they can be turned into something else. So yeah, there's a beach in Falmouth where I can find nurdles, but there's an awful lot of other little tiny white stones that look very, very, very similar. And that's why there's certain beaches people say that there aren't any, because my mum was adamant there are no nurdles in Pembrokeshire. She said, no, there are no nurdles in Pembrokeshire. I come from Pembrokeshire, I've never seen one, there isn't one. And then she went to go and see her family, and she came back and she went, there's nurdles in Pembrokeshire. And it was like, if you look for them, you will find them. But yeah, it's a good question. It's really hard. And it was because I was posting on social media, I've looked at all these blue nurdles I found, and someone came on and said, oh no, they're biobeads. And then I was like, what's a biobead? There's a whole other chain of investigation, which is this book. Nurdle and the microplastics is all the other microplastics out there. So that's all about the BB pellets and the biobeads. And I got into a bit of trouble with Wessex Water about that one, because I'm not supposed to do that. But yeah, any other?
Two questions. Firstly, do you sell them books? So I buy them as presents. Do you sell them?
Yes, I did have a website until I got hacked, but don't have a website anymore. But if you go into any publisher, any bookshop, they can order it in for you. So Hunting Raven stock it, and Millie Mooney and Frome stock it, There's a few beach locations, but any bookshop can order them in now.
Okay,
So, yeah.
and I think you said it's the third year that they've been doing the hunt.
No, the hunt's been going a lot longer.
Oh, okay.
The hunt's been going, Phaedra's been going for quite a while. It's just, I only discovered them 3 years ago and started screaming about them.
But,
Yeah.
because you said, if we go out and do one with the pressure of the government or they go,
Yeah.
had they been doing that previously, or is this a big, I know they're obviously
The Phaedra, this is where it blows my mind. If you look on the Phaedra website now, they've got a map of Nurdle finds and they're totalising it. And now, it's now a worldwide hunt. And they put little crosses on beach where they found it. And every single beach has got little crosses on it across the whole world. But apparently the numbers aren't great enough yet to get the legislation. They're making headway with Operation Clean Sweep. More companies are signing up for it. But again, there's still not the legal need to do that. So it's a bit of a, I've signed up to, it's a bit of a tick exercise at the moment.
Do you think the issue of nodal pollution is getting better or worse?
Worse. Over, because I've been beach cleaning before, during and after lockdown, because of the PPE and all that sort of thing, the nodal loss has been staggering, absolutely staggering, yeah. Because packaging increased as well, because food had to be safe, so everything started being double wrapped and all things like that. So actually packaging has increased. So yeah, from what I'm seeing and from what I'm hearing, it's there's more people starting to talk about nurdles, but
do you feel any hope?
I do want to talk to children. It's why I can't do the political, I can't do the MPs. I tried that and got stonewalls, and I thought that's a waste of my energy. It depresses me. I can't. But if you talk to children, they're so indignant and they're so outraged and they're so and it's so black and white to them. Why don't we just stop buying plastic? It's just so clear cut, and they're so logical. So yes, the children give me great hope. Politicians and big businesses less so. But the children are the next generation of politicians and big businesses. So that's a teacher talking, isn't it? It's not. But yeah, any other?
Do nurdles float?
Yeah.
They do.
Yeah. So it's I've got a sort of really big tank, and if you pour them in, 1 or 2 plastics will sink, but most nurdles just float on the surface. And the interesting thing, when you can come and have a little look, as nurdles float, the waves and UV rays change their colour, so you can actually age them. So they start off pure virgin white or translucent, and then the older they get, the more orange they go into brown. So if you look at these, you can actually get them out, and then you can see that's really old. So on St Michael's Mount, you saw lots of the nurdles were orangey brown. That means they're old pellet spills. They've been there a while. So on St Michael's Mount, there was really dark chocolate brown going all the way through to clear. Same with beaches in Southampton, Charmouth. So you can see this pellets loss has been year on year on year on year on year on year. There's a beach in Wales, so you can sometimes tell the beach depending on the nurdles you find. So that's a beach in Southampton, so they're obviously making green stuff in the plastic factory near those. Charmouth is yellow, blue and clear. Falmouth is predominantly clear, so sometimes if I was to put that on social media, there's a few very nerdy nurdlers that, like me, will go, you've been to Charmouth, and things like that. No, you've been to Southampton. But yeah, the browner the nurdle, the longer it's been floating in the sea. So
Because they absorb things.
it's partly because they absorb. If they have like in some of my books, some of the nurdles have got like black bits. That's absorption of whatever they've been floating in. But no, it's the UV, it's the waves in the UV just discolours them. So it just discolours them. It also makes them brittle. So these are ridiculously brittle because of the UV exposure. I thought it was just the waves bashing them up. But actually, it's when they're floating on the surface like that. So sometimes you get things, and that side will be beautiful green, and that side will be white, and it's because it's been floating that way up, and then that side will be far more brittle than that side. Really strange aside that I've got to share because it's really sad. If you put 2 flip-flops in the sea, this is called float semantics. Some beaches you will only find, this is a total aside, this isn't nurdles, but I love it. some beaches you'll only find left flip-flops, and some beaches you'll only find right flip-flops, because if you put two flip-flops in the sea, because of the curve, the way they hit the waves, this one will go that way, and that one will go that way. So they've done studies where if there was a spillage of flip-flops at sea, and it happened with trainers, Nike trainers, and they've tracked them, and some ended up in Australia and some ended up in America because of this, and it was all to do with the left or the right. So it's called float semantics. So they started looking at oil slits, then they started looking at how plastics are affected in the ocean and how they move, and then that's how they can start doing those simulations with nurdle and pellet loss, because they've done the sort of like studies leading back to it. And float semantics, if you're really nerdy, is a really fascinating thing to start having a look at, because rubber ducks is another one they studied, and it's really, interesting if you're quite nerdy. Any other questions?
So how close is it
For the nurdles to be declared as hazardous waste, is that
A long way.
a long way?
Yeah, a long way. Because there's so many spillages, there's so many different ways that they are lost. It would just cause big businesses so much money. I've been on talks with FEDRA. There's another person in America called Plastic Patrol, and they've got lawyers with them. They're talking with the big businesses. Operation Clean Sweep is the closest they've got so far, and there's some companies signing up to it. But I've been to companies that have signed up with Operation Clean Sweep and found nurdles littering all over there. I got sent away by security guards, but there's still nurdles everywhere. But it's short of, I'm not far off taking massive bags of nurdles and nurdle and just sitting on the steps of various politicians and sort of saying, it's very invisible. So that's why a giant blue one thought it makes it a bit more visible. But yeah, it's just hidden. Nobody knows about it. It's mad.
That's rubbish. Have you found nurdles inside the bodies of fish and whales?
I haven't personally. There's many, many, many photos, especially after that Sri Lankan thing. There was incredible footage of animals with those. In Southampton, I've seen swans, for some reason, seem to go to very heavily plastic habitated areas, whether it's because the sand's warm or I don't know. And in Southampton, I've seen swans gobbling down mouthfuls of nurdles. So, yeah, but I would imagine, there's people who've seen really horrible things, really, really horrible things, and they are finding creatures with massive amounts of, like that turtle that I showed with all the 100 plastics inside it. South Africa, they've got a big problem with blue nurdles because they look like the jellyfish, the blue jellyfish. What's it called? Blue bottle jellyfish, yes. So if you've got an accumulation of blue nurdles floating on the surface, the turtles and the sea creatures think that they're blue bottle, and so they're munching down. So blue nurdles are one of the most lethal to sea creatures, apparently, in certain parts of the world. So it's scary, but we can do something about it. It's scary, but we can sort of share, and all of you are doing amazing things to sort of like minimise plastic. And so the less plastic we use, that's what my line in the book, the less plastic we use, the less nurdles get free. And it's that sort of like, we've got to use less nurdles. Because so many people say, well, it's fine, I buy a bottle and I recycle it. Yeah, but you're just making nurdles all the way along the way line of that. And it's sharing that sort of thing. Yes, that could be recycled, but every time that gets recycled, some of these go in the ocean. And it's that really clear. And to my class, they're like, this is really clear. I don't understand why people aren't getting this. Come and have a play with. But yeah, come and have a look.